The billionaire froze when her paralyzed daughter suddenly lifted one finger for the first time in 4 years. The movement was tiny, almost invisible, but the room went completely silent because every doctor in the country had told them the same thing: the girl might never move independently again. Yet the man standing beside her wheelchair had not promised a miracle, asked for money, or claimed to be a doctor. He was simply a single father who had once been a Navy SEAL and had quietly said 3 words that changed everything: "Let me help." If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, leave a meaningful comment, and subscribe to our channel so you can remain part of our family and our community. Eleanor Whitmore had spent her entire adult life believing that every problem had a solution. At 44, she was the billionaire founder and CEO of a technology company that had grown from a tiny startup into an international empire. Her name appeared in newspapers, investors listened when she spoke, and people assumed that wealth had given her everything she could ever want. But Eleanor would have traded every building she owned for one ordinary afternoon with her daughter before the accident. Her daughter, Rosalie, had been 12 when a terrible highway accident changed both their lives. Rosalie survived, but a severe spinal injury left her unable to walk and with very limited movement in her arms and hands. The doctors warned Eleanor that recovery could not be guaranteed. Rehabilitation might improve her strength, but nobody could promise that Rosalie would ever stand again. Eleanor refused to accept that possibility. She brought specialists to their private estate and flew Rosalie to rehabilitation centers across the country. She paid for experimental equipment, advanced therapy machines, private nurses, and every treatment recommended by reputable physicians. Rosalie worked hard, but after years of painful therapy, progress became almost impossible to see. Her muscles remained weak, her legs would not support her weight, and she gradually stopped believing that anything would change. The cruelest part was not the wheelchair itself. It was watching her mother look at her every morning with a mixture of love, fear, and desperation, as if Rosalie's disability were a problem Eleanor had personally failed to solve. Then came Connor Hayes. Connor was 39, a single father raising his 9-year-old son, Archie. He had taken a job at one of Eleanor's rehabilitation facilities as a maintenance supervisor. His work involved repairing equipment, checking safety systems, and keeping the building functional. He was quiet, disciplined, and unusually observant. What nobody at the facility knew was that Connor had once served in the Navy SEALs. He had spent years learning how to remain calm when circumstances became frightening and how to break complicated problems into small, manageable steps. After leaving the military, he had struggled with the transition to ordinary life, especially after becoming a widower and suddenly finding himself responsible for raising Archie alone. He had eventually realized that his greatest mission was no longer military service. It was being a father. Connor first noticed Rosalie on a bright afternoon when he was repairing a damaged wheelchair ramp outside the therapy center. She was sitting nearby with her physical therapist, looking frustrated. The therapist was encouraging her to reach for a training bar, but Rosalie had already tried several times and was close to giving up. Connor did not interrupt. He simply watched the equipment for a moment and noticed that one part of the support mechanism was slightly misaligned. He repaired it, tested the ramp, and returned to his work. Rosalie noticed him. Later, she watched him carefully inspect another piece of equipment before allowing anyone to use it. There was something about his calmness that caught her attention. Over the next few days, Connor became a familiar presence. He never treated Rosalie as helpless. When he saw her struggling with a small task, he did not immediately take over. He gave her time. If she wanted assistance, he waited for her to ask. That difference mattered. Rosalie had spent years surrounded by people who constantly told her what she needed. Connor was the first person in a long time who allowed her to decide when she needed help. Eleanor noticed the change. She also became suspicious. She had spent years protecting Rosalie from disappointment, and she did not trust an unknown employee getting close to her daughter. When she investigated Connor's background, she discovered his Navy SEAL history. That made her even more cautious. She wondered why a highly trained former SEAL was working in a rehabilitation facility instead of pursuing a more prestigious career. Connor's answer was simple: he wanted a stable life for his son. One afternoon, Connor's son Archie visited the facility while waiting for his father to finish work. Archie was carrying a small remote-controlled car. Rosalie watched him drive it across the courtyard. Archie noticed her interest and brought it closer. Soon the two were playing together. Rosalie could not move the car herself, so Archie placed the controller within reach and adjusted the buttons so she could operate it with limited hand movement. Connor watched quietly. He noticed something Eleanor had missed. Rosalie's strongest movements happened when she was enjoying herself rather than when someone was demanding improvement. He began suggesting small activities that combined play with rehabilitation. Nothing dangerous and nothing that replaced medical care. Simple tasks such as controlling the car, moving lightweight objects, squeezing soft therapy material, and reaching for colored markers. He turned exercises into games. Rosalie began participating more willingly. Eleanor was grateful but remained afraid of disappointment. Then a major setback occurred. During a therapy session, Rosalie attempted to move her right hand and failed repeatedly. Frustration overwhelmed her. She knocked the therapy equipment away and began crying. Eleanor immediately rushed forward, ready to call another specialist. Connor gently stopped her. He explained that Rosalie did not need another person telling her to try harder. She needed someone to remind her that one difficult day did not erase months of progress. Eleanor became emotional because she realized she had been doing exactly that without meaning to. Every time Rosalie failed, Eleanor searched for another treatment. Every time Rosalie succeeded, Eleanor immediately wondered what the next milestone should be. She had been so focused on getting her daughter walking again that she had forgotten to celebrate the person Rosalie already was. Connor began working with Rosalie only through activities approved by her rehabilitation team. He never promised that she would walk. He never claimed his military experience could heal a spinal injury. Instead, he taught her something his military years had taught him: large victories were usually built from tiny actions repeated with patience. One finger. One breath. One reach. One attempt. One more try. For several weeks, Rosalie worked harder than she had in years. Then one afternoon, something extraordinary happened. Connor was helping her practice transferring from her wheelchair to a supported therapy chair under professional supervision. Rosalie struggled. Her arms trembled. Her face became tense. Eleanor stood nearby, afraid to breathe. Connor reminded her to focus on the next movement instead of the entire distance. Rosalie pushed against the support. Nothing happened. She tried again. Her shoulders moved slightly. Then one of her hands shifted. Eleanor stared. Rosalie had moved her finger. It was barely a movement. But it was voluntary. The physical therapist immediately documented it and began testing her response. Rosalie repeated the movement. Eleanor covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. Connor smiled, but he refused to call it a miracle. He called it progress. That distinction changed Eleanor. She stopped measuring her daughter's life only through dramatic outcomes. Rosalie continued rehabilitation, and progress remained uneven. Some days she could move her fingers better. Other days she struggled. But now she had something she had lost long before her physical strength disappeared: hope. Connor also faced his own struggle. His son Archie began asking questions about why his father was always helping everyone else. Connor realized that he had become so focused on caring for Rosalie that he was neglecting his own child. He felt guilty. Eleanor noticed. She encouraged Connor to spend more time with Archie and offered him flexible hours. Connor initially resisted because he did not want special treatment. Eleanor explained that she had finally learned the difference between helping someone and controlling them. That sentence stayed with him. The two families slowly became close. Archie and Rosalie developed a friendship that had nothing to do with disability or wealth. They played games, watched birds from the garden, and competed over who could design the funniest wheelchair decorations. Rosalie began laughing more often. Eleanor started joining them. For the first time since the accident, the estate felt like a home instead of a private hospital. Then another unexpected turning point arrived. A major rehabilitation conference was being held at Eleanor's facility. Doctors, therapists, researchers, and donors gathered during the afternoon to discuss advances in spinal injury recovery. Eleanor had planned to introduce a new research initiative worth millions of dollars. Rosalie was present in the audience. Connor stood at the back. During the presentation, one of the specialists described patients like Rosalie in terms of statistics and probabilities. The words were medically accurate, but Eleanor looked at her daughter and suddenly understood how exhausting it was to hear your entire future described as a percentage. Rosalie quietly reached for Eleanor's hand. Then she did something nobody expected. She lifted her hand and made the small movement she had practiced for months. Eleanor smiled through tears. The conference continued, but Eleanor no longer cared about impressing investors. She announced that her foundation would fund rehabilitation programs focused not only on physical recovery but also on dignity, emotional resilience, family support, and accessible independence. Connor later told her that it was one of the best decisions she had ever made. Eleanor replied that she had finally stopped trying to buy a miracle and started building opportunities. Months later, Rosalie achieved another milestone. With a specialized support system and a team of professionals around her, she stood for several seconds. Connor was there. Archie was there. Eleanor was there. Rosalie's legs trembled, and she could not remain standing for long. But when she sat back down, she was smiling. Eleanor cried harder than she had at any business victory in her life. Rosalie had not magically recovered. Her disability had not disappeared. Her future still contained challenges. But she had discovered that hope did not require certainty. Sometimes hope simply meant believing tomorrow was worth trying for. Before we reach the ending, please leave a meaningful comment telling us what you think Connor gave Rosalie that money could never buy. Was it patience, dignity, courage, friendship, or simply the freedom to believe in herself again? Share your thoughts with our community, because someone reading your comment may need that reminder today. Years later, Eleanor's Rehabilitation Foundation had helped thousands of families. Connor became a program director, using his experience as a former Navy SEAL not to teach combat, but resilience, teamwork, discipline, and calm under pressure. Archie grew into a confident young man who proudly told people that his father had taught him the most important lesson of all: strength was not about never needing help. Rosalie continued using a wheelchair, but she became an advocate for accessibility and disability rights. She learned to drive an adapted vehicle, returned to school, and eventually began speaking at rehabilitation events. At one such event, she told a crowded audience about the first person who had changed her life after the accident. She did not call Connor a hero. She said he had simply looked at her and treated her like a person who still had a future. Eleanor sat in the front row, tears rolling down her face. Connor stood at the back beside Archie. He remembered the frightened girl who had once believed her life was over. Now she was speaking confidently in front of hundreds of people. After the event, Rosalie rolled toward Connor and smiled. She thanked him. Connor shook his head and reminded her that she had done the hard work herself. That was the truth. He had not healed her. He had not promised something medicine could not guarantee. He had simply helped her discover that progress could begin with something as small as one finger moving for the first time in years. And Eleanor finally understood the greatest lesson of all. Money could build hospitals. Money could hire specialists. Money could purchase equipment. But money could not manufacture courage. It could not force hope into a frightened heart. It could not buy the patience of a father or the determination of a child. Sometimes the person who changes a life is not the richest person in the room or the most powerful. Sometimes it is the quiet person who kneels beside you and says, in the simplest possible way, that you do not have to face the struggle alone. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey.